Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Ada. I'm going to be talking about pressure, and it's not the kind of pressure you feel before an exam. I'm going to be talking about the silent kind that shapes your character, your beliefs, your nature, how you see yourself, how you see others. So, pressure is a good thing. It doesn't always have to be a bad thing, but it can either build diamonds or it can actually crush you. What really matters is how you understand pressure. Where does it come from? How does it work? What do you do with it? So what really is important is it can be a good thing, but it can't be good if you don't know what you're dealing with. So, what is pressure? Pressure is invisible rules. They are social norms in a different font. And if you're like me, if you've had undiagnosed ADHD most of your life, or if you've been bullied before, if you've struggled to find your voice, then you'll know that pressure doesn't whisper, it really screams. So, first of all, where does pressure come from? Well, historically, pressure comes with power. And in the early rulings, when religion became more widely spread, well, theocracy became a better way to manage citizens, other people. And with men getting more power more commonly, both physically and politically, they use these, the fear and power that religion holds to create social norms that target more, minorities and women, because in that way it's easier to control them. For example, women would be called witches and burnt if they could read, or people of color, they were slaves, or other minorities were forced to conform into something that they were not. And yeah, we've made progress, of course. We've gone through a few wars, a few protests. However, old habits still die hard because social norms evolve and they don't disappear. Take, for example, hateful comments on the internet. Now, yes, we have international humanitarian law, and yes, it covers discrimination. However, we still see hateful discrimination propaganda on the internet in comment sections very widely spread. Does IHL cover this? No, they have better things to do. Well, okay, we know what it is. Why don't we stop, right? I mean, okay. It's not that easy because pressure is actually working in a loop. So, first, you get pressured by society. It is something that is inevitable. Then, you face consequences, both to your mental, your social status, and it can affect your academic or career life, which then gets you to, okay, well, at least let's live, right? So you try to pretend, you try to be something that you're not. You want to be something that isn't actually you, but that's what you're expected to do. So then you, by accident, can start pressuring others as well, even without realizing, because after a while, imitation, the idea of it, what you're imitating can become reality because you get influenced. Then, of course, you know, wheels on a bus go round and round, but of course there are exceptions. Maybe you're the exception, maybe you will become the exception. There are exceptions to everything. Well, pressure in family, that gets a bit trickier because, you know, for example, oh, get a score over 90, do your homework, you're going to that recital whether you like it or not, watch your weight, why are you acting like that? You're being ungrateful. That's, at first it can sound like tough love, it can sound like suggestions to try and better your child. However, after a while, with everything else, it can start becoming strict expectations, and that, in return, turns into pressure. And the culture of hitting your child, children being hit to be disciplined, is also very wrong because that's not a part of the culture. It's actually abuse and it's not okay. Now, what about undiagnosed learning disabilities, the undiagnosed neurodivergent people? Well, that that becomes even harder because, well, I had undiagnosed ADHD most of my life, and I've done a lot of research on ASD. And what I've found is society doesn't make space for you. In fact, it tries to correct you in a way. Now, for example, with ADHD, there you can talk too much, or you can interrupt others processing information in your classes or reading a book. It can feel blurry, and you can feel frozen or stuck up in a task that you're doing. It's called executive dysfunction, actually. Or with ASD, you can miss social cues, which can lead to a lot of misunderstandings, such as you coming off as rude, you coming off as quote-unquote weird. Either way, these are not a choice. This is how your brain is wired to react to things. However, society does treat it as if it's a choice. It demands the almost impossible out of you, and then you start blaming yourself consequently. For example, with people with ADHD, they are more prone to be, well, depressed. They are more prone to be addicts because their brain works very fast, so they can make decisions faster. Science advances, Berkshire Healthcare, they all cover this with their research. Now, some can normalize this within themselves. They can conform, they can try to pretend like there's something else that they aren't. Is that good? Yes, it can get you in a better place in society. Is it good for you? Absolutely not, because that takes you away from your own identity and who you are as a person. So, okay, well, what about bullying? So, for example, bullying, it's pressure with a face, really, it is. You are taught to hide parts of yourself that are actually very harmless, and every smile, every word, every action, it all becomes a calculation. Take, for example, my guidance counselor. She said that it was okay for my friend to hit me because I was acting quote-unquote weird. Keep in mind that I was in the 5th grade when that happened. Let that sink in. And for the newer generation, it's quite different because we had something called the pandemic. It was the COVID-19 pandemic. And all social filters were gone during this time. No one saw the person behind the screen, and everyone got a lot more comfortable. While this could lead some people to explore themselves more freely, others got very comfortable talking about whatever they wanted. And adding this to the emotional weight that the pandemic holds, with the anxiety, the isolation, the depression, the overstimulation of all these digital devices, it caused either people to be quote-unquote too soft or completely numb. It was walking on eggshells, basically. Now, there was also a time when Gen Alpha got onto the internet way earlier than they should have been. I blame the parents. That's for a separate TEDx talk. Basically, what happened was they were bullied for being children on the internet because they were children. Well, Gen Z bullied Gen Alpha, and Gen Alpha went through the loop that I mentioned before. They created their own skincare, their own trends, their own slang. And Gen Z, while bullying Gen Alpha, well, Gen Z imitated Gen Alpha to make fun of them. However, as I said, imitation can become reality. The idea of it can. So, some Gen Alpha culture, such as the very rude and inconsiderate jokes that can deeply affect someone, also went into Gen Z then. And in conclusion, then our generation made bullying okay. And it was even considered cool at this rate. Because people were tired of trying to shape themselves to fit someone else's emotions. Now, let's pause. What did we talk about? We talked about where pressure comes from, what it is, the history behind it, pressure in society, family, and the internet. What can we do? Well, for one, you can use your voice. I mean, there is no really overreacting, especially nowadays, because people process emotions differently. They react differently because people have different life experiences, different parents, different cultures, different emotional regulations. They have different mental stabilities. So overreacting is a myth in most cases. When you speak out, people will try to tell you that you're being too soft. I promise you aren't. It's just people reacting differently. Another thing you can do is scan the room, because there are people like you. Scanning the room and paying attention to your surroundings before you do anything or come to any conclusions is so incredibly important. That's how I found my best friend of 3 years and ongoing. So I promise that it actually does work, and there are people like you. Another solution you can go for is the internet, if you have access to the internet. While family pressure is more difficult, if you do have access to the internet, there are real and trustworthy communities that are more than willing to help you. While you need to be safe when doing this, you can also be open. And another thing you can do on the internet is you can do research if you think you're struggling, if you think you might be neurodivergent. Don't do a quick Google research. There are very trustable sources that are supported by universities. And if you do your research, maybe you can get to a conclusion and you can start working from there. Now, another way is journaling. For example, if you don't have access to the internet, you can write down your emotions, you can write down how you felt at that moment, which can improve your memory. It can help you look back on how you felt and reconsider, reflect on yourself. And it is so incredibly important to not spiral down into something that you can't get out of. Well, it's also important to mention that pressure isn't there to torture you. I know it seems pretty negative so far, but it's actually not. It's how you experience life, and it's how you grow. The thing is, pressure does not have to crush you. It can, as I said, build diamonds. It can shape you. Because without pressure, you cannot understand the complexities of life. There are certain things in life where you, in order to succeed, success comes from overcoming some sort of pressure or some sort of challenge. If there is no challenge in life, if you're always happy, if there's always something easy, then there is no point in it being easy anymore. There's nothing that can tell you otherwise, and you won't feel proud of yourself. So, well, I have this hobby. I like to draw a lot, and I was thinking, well, a pencil also works with pressure, right? You sharpen it right, you learn how to move it, you feel how it's comfortable in your hand. You learn techniques, you watch tutorials, you see others. Sometimes you even switch your tool, what you draw with, how you draw, what you draw. And while the outcome might be something that others like and you don't, what truly is a masterpiece is when you start enjoying the process and when you start overcoming something. That's when you're so happy with what you've done. That's what you call a masterpiece in your eyes. And I'm not talking about pencils. As they say, thank you for listening to my TED Talk.